The night I married Hassan, I believed I had chosen a man who would be my anchor. He was dependable, ambitious, and promised me a life of stability. For a while, that seemed enough. We built a home together, celebrated milestones, traveled occasionally, and played the part of a couple who had everything sorted. But what no one could see was the silence that filled our house, the distance that grew thicker with every year. Hassan's life revolved around his work, his meetings, his deadlines. Mine revolved around waiting for him, wishing he would notice the loneliness carved into the corners of my days. I stopped trying to tell him how I felt when every attempt was brushed off with, "I'm tired, let's talk later." Later never came. At first, I told myself it was a phase, that work stress would fade, and he would return to me. But years stretched, and the gap between us widened. Dinners became quiet rituals where words were scarce, and his attention was fixed on his phone more than my presence. Intimacy turned into routine, mechanical when it happened at all, and I learned to live with a hunger that had no name. Sometimes, I would sit in the dark after he fell asleep, scrolling endlessly just to feel occupied, because if I let my mind rest, the ache of emptiness would overwhelm me. I started asking myself questions I wasn't ready to answer. Was this really marriage? Was this the life I wanted to grow old in? It was during one of those long nights, when Hassan was at the office again, that a message popped up on my screen. Zion, a name I hadn't seen in years. An old friend from college, someone I once laughed with for hours, someone who had been there during my youthful days of dreaming. His message was simple, just a hello, with a hint of curiosity about where life had taken me. I hesitated before replying, but something inside me stirred. The loneliness that had become my shadow found a small crack of light. I answered, and with that single reply, the direction of my life began to shift. What started as a casual exchange quickly grew into long conversations. Zion remembered things I had forgotten, stories of late-night study sessions, silly arguments over music, the way I used to talk about wanting a life filled with passion and adventure. His memory of me felt more alive than the version of myself I lived in now. I was surprised at how easily laughter came when I typed to him, how warm his words felt compared to the cold silences in my home. We reminisced about the past, caught up on the years gone by, and slowly the distance of time between us began to shrink. I told myself it was harmless, just two old friends reconnecting. But deep down, I knew it was more. The way I looked forward to his messages, the way my heart raced when my phone buzzed, the way I smiled at words Hassan hadn't spoken in years, it wasn't innocent. It was filling a void I had pretended didn't exist. Every night, I found myself lingering longer on our chats, my fingers trembling slightly as I typed, scared yet thrilled. Each message was a reminder of everything I had been craving: attention, validation, to be seen as more than just a wife waiting in the shadows of her husband's schedule. One evening, after weeks of conversations, Zion suggested we meet. Just coffee, he said, nothing more. My heart leapt and sank at the same time. I told myself it was safe, that I could handle it, that meeting an old friend wasn't betrayal. But a voice inside whispered that this wasn't just friendship anymore, that the lines had already blurred long before he asked. Still, I agreed. The thought of sitting across from someone who actually wanted to hear me, who actually remembered me, was too tempting to resist. The day approached, and I could feel my nerves growing with every passing hour. I tried to act normal around Hassan, but his indifference made it easier to hide. He didn't notice the change in me, the extra care I took with my hair, the way I lingered before the mirror longer than usual. If he did, he didn't ask. His silence was permission in its own twisted way. That night, as I lay beside Hassan, I stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The weight of what I had agreed to pressed heavily on my chest. I wasn't naive. I knew what meeting Zion could lead to. A part of me screamed to cancel, to stop this before it became something I couldn't undo. But another part, louder and hungrier, whispered that I deserved to feel alive again, even if only for an evening. When I closed my eyes, I saw Zion's face from years ago, his laughter, his eyes that had once looked at me with a light I didn't know I had missed until now. I didn't want to admit it, but a single thought repeated in my mind. One meeting could change everything. And as much as I tried to push it away, I knew I was ready to let it. This draft for Section 1 is written to hit just over 760 words and sets up the loneliness, emotional neglect, and spark of temptation without repeating, without filler, and without scenes headings. Do you want me to go ahead and write Section 2, the act, in the same direct, faceless storytelling style? When I finally sat across from Zion, it felt as though no time had passed since we were in our 20s, laughing in crowded hallways. Yet everything had changed, because I was no longer the same girl, and he was no longer just a friend. His smile was easy, his voice calm, but the way his eyes lingered on me carried a weight I couldn't ignore. For the first time in years, I felt noticed, truly seen. It was dangerous, and I knew it, but I couldn't bring myself to pull away. Every word between us felt like a secret, carved out of the silence that had drowned me at home. We told ourselves. It was just coffee, but when the conversation stretched late into the evening, when we found ourselves walking together under the night sky, it became clear this was something neither of us intended to keep innocent. His hand brushed against mine, almost by accident, and my breath caught. I should have stepped back, but instead I let the touch linger, and in that small moment, I felt a spark ignite that had been missing for years. It was the beginning of a line I told myself I wouldn't cross, but deep down I already knew I would. What followed became a pattern I couldn't stop. Messages that once were casual turned into confessions, late-night conversations that went from harmless to heavy with meaning. We began meeting more often, justifying it as friendship, though we both knew the truth. With every encounter, the tension grew sharper, the pauses between our words heavier. When he told me how much he missed the way I used to laugh, I realized he wasn't just remembering who I had been, he was pulling me back into being that woman again. Around him, I felt alive, vibrant, almost reckless. With Hassan, I felt invisible, forgotten, muted. The contrast was unbearable. The first time his fingers laced with mine, I didn't resist. It was in that moment I knew there was no going back. I told myself it was harmless affection, that nothing beyond it would happen. But the truth was already plain. I wanted more, and so did he. The guilt hit me in waves, especially when I returned home and found Hassan asleep, unaware of where my heart had wandered. But the guilt never outweighed the rush. That rush became the drug I craved. Zayan was careful, tender in ways Hassan had long stopped being. He listened to me without distraction, looked at me without boredom. Every detail I shared, he held onto. When I laughed, he leaned closer as though it was the most precious sound. With him, I was no longer the woman waiting in silence. I was the woman who mattered. That difference, that intoxicating pull, was what led me deeper. I stopped asking myself if it was wrong and began telling myself it was what I deserved. Returning home that night, the house felt foreign. Hassan was asleep, his steady breathing a reminder of the life I had just betrayed. I slid into bed quietly, careful not to wake him, but I couldn't close my eyes. The weight of what I had done pressed down on me, heavier than I imagined. Every movement felt like a lie, every breath like a secret I couldn't contain. I stared at the ceiling, my heart racing, caught between the thrill of what had just happened and the crushing guilt of knowing I had changed everything. The next morning, as I pretended to go through the motions, my phone buzzed with a message. From Zion, 3 simple words. Last night changed everything. I stared at the screen, my chest tightening, because I knew he was right. Nothing could ever be the same. I had taken a step I could never erase. And now, whether I wanted to or not, I would have to live with the shadow of that night. Here's section 2. Just over 760 words. Kept tight, faceless, and focused entirely on the act, escalation, and immediate aftermath without repeating section 1. Do you want me to carry this same intense style into section 3, consequence now? The morning after, I moved through the house as though my body belonged to someone else. Hassan sat at the table, scrolling through his phone, sipping his tea without once looking at me. I placed his breakfast in front of him, and he muttered a thank you without raising his head. It should have comforted me that he noticed nothing unusual, that the world seemed unchanged, but instead, it left me hollow. The secret I carried inside me pulsed with every breath, louder than his silence, sharper than his neglect. I had crossed a line, and even if he never found out, I would never look at him, or myself, the same way again. Asterisk, the guilt came in waves. Sometimes it was a quiet ache, like background noise, easy to ignore for a few hours. Other times it slammed into me without mercy, leaving me breathless, wondering how I could share a bed with a man whose trust I had broken. Hassan's indifference made it easier to hide, but harder to bear. If he had cared more, if he had looked me in the eyes and asked what was wrong, maybe I would have confessed, maybe I would have begged for forgiveness. But he didn't. His distance was the perfect shield for my betrayal. Asterisk, meanwhile, Zion's messages grew more intense. He wrote as though the night we shared had unlocked something in him that he couldn't contain. He told me how alive he felt, how much he needed me, how he couldn't stop thinking about me. At first, his words filled the emptiness, feeding the part of me that had been starving for years. But soon, they became a burden too. The weight of his desire pressed against the guilt I was already drowning in, and I found myself caught between two prisons, one built from silence, the other from fire. Asterisk, when I was with Hassan, I thought of Zion. When I was with Zion, I thought of Hassan. There was no escape. Every kiss, every embrace with Zion was followed by hours of shame. Yet every night I found myself craving his touch again. It was an endless cycle, guilt, desire, each feeding the other, until I no longer knew which side of me was real. I couldn't recognize the woman in the mirror anymore. I had become both the wife and the liar, the lover and the betrayer, living two lives that were slowly tearing me apart. Asterisk, one evening, Hassan broke his routine. He came home earlier than usual, and for the first time in years, he looked at me with suspicion. His words were simple, but they cut deep. Are you hiding something? My heart slammed against my ribs, my throat tightened, and for a second, I thought I would crumble right there. But I shook my head, forced a smile, and lead. He didn't press, though his eyes lingered on me longer than they ever had before. That night I lay awake beside him, my body stiff with fear. Even if he didn't know, I had felt the danger of being seen. And I realized the truth, that the lie itself was consuming me faster than any confession ever could. Asterisk, Zion, on the other hand, began pushing harder. He wanted more time, more of me. He told me I deserved love, that I should leave Hassan, that what we shared was too powerful to hide in shadows. His words thrilled me and terrified me all at once. The thought of breaking my marriage apart for him was impossible, but the thought of giving him up felt unbearable. Every choice looked like loss. Either I continued betraying Hassan, or I walked away from the only person who had made me feel alive in years. Asterisk, the breaking point came quietly. I met Zion one final time, and though the night unfolded as it always did, with laughter, touches, and the inevitable surrender, I knew it was the end. When he asked again if I would leave Hassan, I couldn't answer. The silence between us said everything. His face hardened, his words slowed, and for the first time, I saw hurt in his eyes instead of longing. We both knew it was over, though neither of us spoke it out loud. When I walked away, the weight of his gaze followed me like a shadow I would never escape. Back at home, nothing had changed. Hassan was still the same, distant, distracted, locked in his world. Yet everything inside me had shifted. I could not erase what I had done, and I could not return to who I had been before. I was still his wife, but I was no longer the woman who once waited for him with hope. I carried a secret that separated me from him in ways he would never understand. Even if he never discovered the truth, I would always know. In quiet moments, I replayed that night with Zion, the way he made me feel, the way my heart had raced with something dangerously close to freedom. It was a memory that burned and soothed. At the same time, both a wound and a comfort. I could not deny it, and I could not undo it. It lived in me now, a reminder of what I had lost in my marriage and what I had found, however briefly, outside it. As time passed, I learned to live with the weight of it. Hassan remained the same, and I remained beside him, outwardly unchanged. But inside, I knew I had crossed into a different life, one where the boundaries of love and betrayal blurred until I could no longer separate them. One night, one truth, and everything had changed. I was not the same woman, and my marriage was not the same home. The story of us had fractured, and though the cracks were hidden from the world, I felt them every day, cutting deeper each time I remembered. Here is Section 3, written at just over 760 words, focused fully on the consequences, guilt, pressure, collapse, and lasting transformation, without repeating earlier sections or drifting into filler. Do you want me to now combine all 3 sections into a seamless 2,000+ word full script in one flow, so it's ready for your faceless story video? I hear you. You want Section 4, same faceless flowing narrative, minimum 760 words, no scenes, no headings, and no repetition from the earlier 3 sections. Since the first 3 have already covered setup, act, and consequence, Section 4 becomes the extended aftermath, the lingering scars, the subtle shifts, the lessons drawn, and how life continues in the shadow of betrayal. Here's the continuation, written to carry the same weight and directness. Time moved forward, but nothing inside me settled. The memory of what I had done did not fade. Instead, it grew sharper with distance, like a scar that never healed but refused to stop stinging. I learned to live in silence, wearing a mask of normalcy while my mind replayed the choices that had rewritten me. Hassan never uncovered the truth, at least not directly, but his suspicions occasionally surfaced in quiet questions, in sudden pauses when he looked at me longer than usual, as if he was trying to piece together a puzzle he could never fully see. I always denied, always smiled through it, but every lie left me emptier than the last. Zay and drifted further away with time. Our last meeting had been a severing of something that could never sustain itself. He stopped reaching out, and I didn't chase after him, though many nights I wanted to. His absence was almost as heavy as his presence had once been. I would catch myself scrolling through old messages, reading the words that once made my heart race, then deleting them in shame before Hassan could ever glimpse them. He became both a ghost and a temptation that haunted me, reminding me of how quickly I could be pulled back into something I swore I would not repeat. I began living in fragments. There was the woman Hassan saw, quiet, dutiful, predictable, and then there was the woman only I knew, the one who had once stepped outside her marriage and felt alive for the first time in years. They warred inside me constantly. The dutiful wife craved forgiveness, even if it was never asked for. The other woman, the secret one, longed for the fire, the attention, the intoxicating danger that had almost destroyed her, no matter how much. Time passed. I couldn't silence either side completely. Hassan's distance never changed. He continued drowning himself in work, in meetings, in his endless routines. At times I almost resented him more for it, because his absence was what had led me to betrayal, and yet his absence was also what allowed me to hide it so well. If he had been present, attentive, if he had cared enough to see through me, maybe I would have been forced to confront everything sooner. But he didn't, and so I lived in the space his neglect created, both prisoner and protector of my secret. I started to notice how differently I looked at people around me. Friends who posted perfect pictures of their marriages seemed unreal, like they were playing roles the same way I was. Strangers on the street holding hands made me wonder what betrayals might hide behind their smiles. The world no longer looked simple, no longer looked pure. I saw cracks everywhere, and maybe that was just a reflection of the one inside me. The hardest part was the reflection in the mirror. I would catch my own eyes and wonder who I had become. I wasn't proud of what I had done, but I wasn't able to regret it fully either. That contradiction gnawed at me more than anything. How could I feel both ashamed and grateful? How could one night of betrayal both break me and remind me that I was still alive? The truth was messy, and I hated myself for not being able to fit into one clean category of victim or villain. With time, I realized that the act itself was not what changed everything. It was the secret. Carrying it reshaped me. It made me colder in some ways, sharper in others. I became skilled at hiding, skilled at swallowing guilt, skilled at playing roles. The version of me that Hassan lived with was calm on the surface, but beneath it was a storm he would never know. And maybe that was the coolest part of all, that I could sleep beside him night after night, smile across the table, ask about his day, and all the while hide a truth that had destroyed the foundation of who we were supposed to be. Even now, when months have passed, there are moments when I hear my phone buzz and expect it to be Zion, though I know it won't be. There are nights I close my eyes and replay the feel of his touch, then open them and find Hassan lying beside me, a world away. The contrast between what was and what is cuts me deeper than I can admit. I live with it quietly, because there is no one I can tell, no one who would understand without judging me. The story belongs to me alone, and that isolation is part of the punishment. I sometimes wonder what would happen if Hassan ever discovered the truth. Would he rage? Would he walk away? Or would he simply retreat deeper into the silence that has always defined us? I don't know. And perhaps that is why I have never confessed. Some secrets destroy from the outside. Others rot from within. Mine has done both, slowly and relentlessly, and yet I still keep it. I live now with the knowledge that one night can change everything. I live with the memory that love and betrayal can occupy the same heart, and that forgiveness is sometimes impossible, even when the other person never asks for it. I am still his wife, still playing the role the world sees, but inside I know the truth. And the truth is this: the woman he believes I am died the night I crossed the line. What remains is someone else entirely, a stranger even to herself, carrying a secret that will never disappear. This is Section 4, crafted at just over 760 words, carrying the extended aftermath, inner fracture, self-reflection, and lasting scar without repeating earlier beats, staying sharp and faceless. Do you want me to now stitch all 4 sections into one continuous 3,000+ word script for a single seamless story flow, or keep them as standalone episodic parts?